Hello and welcome to the March 2024 BigFix briefing room. I'm Michelle McGough.
And I'm Joe Saylor.
And today we're going to be covering, as usual, Microsoft security. We'll cover some notable current exploits, lots of juicy goodness in there for you. There will be a summary on Linux kernel security. We'll cover the CISA Kev updates, and we'll take a few minutes to focus on a new CyberFocus initiatives report. Joe, why don't you take it away with Microsoft security?
Yeah, so a quick overview here. We've got 61 total CVEs released for Windows products this month. That number is a tiny bit lower than usual, typically being like the 70 to 80 vulnerability range. We do not have any 0 days this month, which the last time that happened was just 2 months ago, and the last time before that was 4 years ago. So I guess Microsoft's been doing pretty good about not having their stuff exploited on day one these last couple of months. So, great work there. We have especially important updates this month for Microsoft Exchange, SQL Server, Azure, Visual Studio, a pretty big one for SCOM, System Center Operations Manager, and then some Office vulnerabilities as well.
And notable vulnerabilities of the month, we have a few. The first one is on the open management infrastructure and its remote code execution. Joe, do you want to break that down for us?
Yeah, so the open management infrastructure tool is a open source tool that allows for applications to manage just endpoints. It's used in SCOM today. This is the kind of big one I mentioned before. It allows any sort of code execution against the OMI interface for an attacker within line of sight of your endpoint. So this doesn't require any sort of user interaction, so it's especially scary from that standpoint. Again, I'll remind you we had no 0 days, so this hasn't been actively exploited right now. But given that it's been disclosed, I expect there's going to be kind of an arms race between attackers and patches starting like right this second. So this one will be especially important to deploy to head off any of those incoming attacks. I do expect that we will see an uptick in scanning against the port, given how juicy this target is and how seemingly easy it's going to be to exploit. So it's OMI runs on port 5986 by default. If you want to get ahead of scanning your infrastructure for where this stuff might be, you can do your own scanning against that port. So I might suggest doing that. This does, from Microsoft's perspective, only affect SCOM, but because it's open source and used elsewhere, I kind of expect us to see, more patches and other products coming out shortly. So keep an eye out in that space.
Yeah, this is one of the times when I would have to agree that the 9.8 rating is a good match for the severity.
Yeah, absolutely. 9.8 is where this one should be.
And here we've got another one. It's an Azure Kubernetes elevation of privileges, another 9.8. What's happening here, Joe?
Yeah, so this one allows attackers to take control of private guests in your Kubernetes network. Again, because it doesn't require any sort of authentication, this does not require a user to touch it. So you don't have to be tricked into, clicking on a questionable executable for an attacker to take advantage of this one. So it's especially dangerous from that perspective. We also tend to think of sandbox devices as, pretty secure just by their very nature. And this really circumvents that. So, an extra layer of worry there about your private guests and your Kubernetes network.
Oof, I think is the only response I have to that one.
To make things even worse, patching the Kubernetes endpoints isn't super straightforward. This requires command lines to be run against your endpoints, requires the latest version of AZ-CompCom, and all of that's in the bulletin, for the exact commands you need. But just keep in mind, this is not as simple as you just apply a patch and forget about it. There's actual things you need to do if you have a Kubernetes network.
Okay, so far my takeaway is no 0 days, but just as much work.
No 0 days, but there's a race. Like this is definitely triggering a race. Everybody kind of makes fun of the phrase of security through obscurity, but I tend to feel a lot better when these things have not been disclosed.
Fair. All right. This one's a little bit lower, a lower score. It's an office elevation of privileges. And I think when we met about this earlier, we were sort of laughing about who might take advantage of it. So I hope you'd share that with us again, Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, this is, when I was reviewing what I wanted to bring forward today, this one kind of caught my eye just because there's some unintended consequence of these vulnerabilities sometimes. Um, this is a really simple, just elevation of privilege on any endpoint that has Office installed, right? So an attacker, if they tricked a user into clicking an executable, they could elevate to system, which is not great, but elevation of privilege for a local attacker that already is authenticated is like those exploits are a dime a dozen on Windows, unfortunately. But this one in particular, just because of how, relatively easy it seems to exploit, I would be more worried about my own users taking advantage of it. Like, what if Shannon from accounting gets bored and wants to install Minecraft? Like, this just lets her do that. So, where we in IT are famously against fun, and so we got to stamp out fun wherever it could be. So this one seemed important to me to close.
Okay. All right. What's next, Joe? Oh yeah. Yeah, the change healthcare supply chain vulnerabilities. I think everybody's heard about this one. Do you want to break it down for us?
Yeah, so this one happened a couple of weeks ago, not super current. The effects are ongoing. So Change Healthcare is a medical payment processor for quite a few healthcare companies. I don't want to say all of them, but enough that it's a White House level problem. Like people were dragged into the White House to take care of this thing. So it was a ransomware attack. I don't know that the particulars of how it was executed are super important, but it does a really good job of highlighting how the magnitude of consequences for not having a secure environment, not sanitizing your help desk inputs, that sort of thing. So that's all important lessons to take. But there are some other things that happened here that I think will affect the security landscape going forward that we should really talk about. Um, a couple of details that to set this up. It was the same group that perpetrated this attack as did the MGM and Caesars hacks from last year. Those were super, super big and took companies down for weeks. Hopefully you remember that. So that was Black Cat or Elfie, depending on what they want to be called for the day. And as a result of the Change Healthcare hack, they were paid $22 million to reverse the damage that they caused, which hasn't been complete yet. That's still ongoing, but they really got rewarded handsomely for their efforts.
Yeah, I saw on social media there was an image of the blockchain transaction. Um, I just thought, ouch, with a healthcare organization paying out this ransom, what's that going to do to other healthcare organizations? Is that going to make them seem like juicier marks?
Yeah, so that's one of the really big knock-on effects here, I think. So there's two. The first one you identified is, well, geez, this is like one of the biggest healthcare ransoms, or is the biggest healthcare ransom ever paid. So now other groups are going to see that there is more money in the pot for them, right? So it's going to incentivize other ransomware groups, of which there are many. Like there's, it's not just Black Cat, it's many. It's going to incentivize them to step up their game because they know that the potential payout is much higher than it's ever been. And then the other one on top of that, Black Cat has $22 million now. That is a very well financed group. And, like any good business, and this is their business, they perpetrate ransomware attacks and they make money off of it. So if you were a business and you had a sudden windfall, well, you would probably reinvest it in your business. So they've got $22 million worth of resources to spend on doing more and more of these kind of attacks.
I noticed here you've got a bullet there on reporting vulnerabilities to us here at BigFix.
Yeah, so this really highlights how hacks against things that are in your supply chain, not necessarily your company, can affect you. So, Change Healthcare got taken down, and that kind of took down the companies that relied on them as well. And we, BigFix, are a part of your supply chain, assuming you're watching this and use us. I hope so. If not, please buy BigFix. Um, So, we take any reports of security vulnerabilities in our products super, super seriously. Please, please, please tell us. The email address at the bottom there, pcert@hcl.com, is our main report avenue. So if you see anything that looks like a vulnerability, if you see anything that sounds like a vulnerability or smells like a vulnerability, please let us know.
We have several internal channels that look for those as well. But
Yeah, I've been personally involved in several of these reports, and we always drive them to completion.
that's great. Well, that's a tough one. TeamCity and Connectwise. Now I heard Connectwise might have been connected, sorry for the pun, to that Change Healthcare ransomware attack. But Connectwise actually said that they weren't, they do have vulnerabilities, a couple of them, but that they weren't relevant to the Change Healthcare attack. So this is something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say what exactly was involved in the Change Healthcare attack. These two in particular are not super current. These happened like a week or two ago. If you have not heard of these vulnerabilities and you think you may have TeamCity or ConnectWise in your environment, you need to turn this off right now and go find out if you're vulnerable to them. So these two both have remote control vulnerabilities that do not require user interaction. So they are just, if your endpoint is visible, it can be taken over with full administrative remote control at any time.
Oof.
So yeah, again, if you have these, turn this off now and go fix it, please. So these have both been actively exploited. There is code out in the wild that is taking over these systems right now. They have not all been updated. As of this morning, some tools that I'm not going to name because that sounds dangerous are reporting about 1,700 vulnerable TeamCity servers on the internet right now. And this is, of course, not stuff behind an intranet firewall. Like it's just internet facing stuff right now. And probably by the time you hear this, they will have already been exploited, but they're out there, and yeah, it's quite a big thing.
Okay.
One thing I really wanted to point out here is the CISA Kev list, which if you've seen any of these before, you've known how we kind of emphasize it. The known exploited vulnerabilities list. If you pay attention to that, this came out and these were posted pretty much right away, like the moment the government caught wind that it was exploited. And so if you are paying attention to that list, you would definitely have seen this before you maybe got affected by it.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in the CISA research and that list. I think that's really why we focus on it every month, because so much of the data that we get is referenced in there.
Yeah.
Oh, virtualization. You mentioned earlier about how being in the sandbox should be a safe thing. And I think this made this vulnerability sort of the one of the month. So here we've got virtualization outside of the sandbox. But inside the sandbox, you're vulnerable. Am I getting that right?
That is absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely terrifying. As a security focused person, as a general power user in my home life, I will very frequently toss like a questionable executable into a virtual machine and, maybe fire up some monitoring tools. And to me, that's a very reasonable defensive posture to take. If I really need to know what's in an executable and, I don't want to like say burn down my main machine, I only burnt down a virtual machine and it's fine. Like no one cares about that. These vulnerabilities in practically everything, it's a strange trend. It's almost a glitch in the matrix moment because both Microsoft Hyper-V, all of the VMware products, practically Workstation, Fusion, and ESXi, along with the earlier Kubernetes vulnerability we talked about, they're all happening at the same time, and they're all pretty similar where, stuff run inside the virtual box can get out of the virtual box. So all of these allow, an attacker who has tricked you into running an executable defensively in your VM can run stuff on your actual workstation or on your actual hypervisor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I always think of some of the influencers in cybersecurity will educate people on how to, look at an exploit and see how it can be harnessed, or how to test or play with a vulnerability to do things with it. And the first thing they do is load up a VM and make you feel safe. And this is exactly the scenario that you're describing, is that in this case, you're not you're not safe.
Yeah, I mean, again, absolutely terrifying. Like
Yeah.
I'm okay with burning down the virtual box, but the moment it gets to my real system, I am not a fan of that. Do not want my stuff to explode. And that's exactly what this leads to.
Okay, well, that's enough, I guess, to think about. Let's move on. Linux kernel security. So you've got a summary for us here. It looks like a pretty mundane month.
Yeah, a little bit. I almost think that this is more than usual for Linux kernel security, at least in terms of severity for me. This is everything over a 7 CVSS for the Linux kernel this month. You'll notice it's really the same thing. It's 3 CVEs, but it's really just one product inside of Linux. And that's the NVMe over TCP driver. The technology is really cool. Like it basically lets you connect your really, really fast NVMe drives directly to your network with TCP without any like really expensive hardware network layer, like say fiber channel in the way that would normally make it perform well. So the technology is really cool, but what this exploit ends up doing is allowing any of those exposed TCP interfaces that talk directly to your really fast hardware to be crashed, like whenever an attacker wants. So, no user interaction. It's not anything that like somebody needs to be tricked into clicking on. It's just if an attacker can see the TCP interface, they can take it down. So as far as Linux vulnerabilities go, this is about as serious as it gets, honestly.
Okay,
Still
well,
not
I've
that
been
serious, but
corrected. But it's just the one. Yeah, it looks like it's the same, just
yeah,
like
absolutely the same. Yeah, just
driver.
different CVs for a very, very similar thing against the same item.
Okay, thanks, Joe. All right, Kev, 13 new entries since last month. Um, Really, this isn't. It kind of feels like it's starting to feel like business as usual, and this list is pretty new. Still, I mean, it's only been around for a couple of years.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really for me kind of a Groundhog's Day moment. I swear every month it is exactly 13 entries. Like I don't know what sort of planet alignment thing has happened to make it be exactly 13 every month, but here we are. I never have to resize this graph though, which is, kind of nice, I guess.
I
Take
think I
the win where I can
did.
get it.
I think I did just so I could edit the title.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So the items in red we've already talked about, the ConnectWise and TeamCity vulnerabilities. This would have been a really great thing for you to have already paid attention to. In general, the rest of these are not super surprising. To me, this month, the thing that's a little abnormal is that there's a lot of mobile device exploited vulnerabilities this month. We've got both iOS and a fair bit of Android in here. So, if you're using those as devices inside your enterprise environment, please take an extra look at your Apple and Android devices for any updates.
And the same goes for at home too. I mean, we're an Apple household, and it used to feel like we weren't getting as many updates, compared to when we were on Windows. And that's really changed, Joe. I mean, we're feeling the pain of the constant OS updates for all of our devices, regardless of the
Yeah,
platform.
my every time I look at this list, my behavior absolutely changes on my own Android phone from update later to update now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, oh, yeah. Okay. So we've got a new report in CyberFocus. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so just a couple of weeks ago, CyberFocus 1.2 came out. If you don't have this already in your BigFix console and web reports, check out your license overview page and see if you have it available. And if not, talk to your local salesperson and see what it'll take. So this new report that we have that just came out, it essentially allows you to visualize uh, vulnerabilities from groups of CVEs against multiple groups of computers.
Is that
So
what the supergroup means?
yeah, we're calling them supergroups. That's
Group.
new. Yes, they're very super. So that's a new term for BigFix. It is not a single clump of computers. It's basically multiple clumps of computers within the group. So it's you just select, within the interface, as many groups as you want. I think the default limit is like 30, so it goes up pretty high. And that's the groups that it uses to differentiate the colors within the graph that you see on the right there.
Okay, and each one of those selected, bundle of groups is a supergroup effectively. So it would represent a different color on the
Yeah.
chart here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then you said it's checking against advanced persistent threat groups. You want to talk about threat groups?
Yeah. So just to back up 1 second, the default for this is to like it wants the user to paste in just a list of CVEs to test against. However, inside the debug menu, and this is in the documentation, you'll have to go check it out. There's a little slider that allows you to enable the advanced persistent threat group option inside of the report. An APT group, an advanced persistent threat group, APT for short, is essentially a well-known group of attackers that tend to use similar CVEs within their own group. So for instance, and we talked about the Black Cat group earlier for Change Healthcare, you would be able to add the Black Cat APT group and see which of your systems are vulnerable to CVEs that they have been known to use. So if I were a medical provider right now, I would want to know what they're targeting right now and immediately resolve any of those CVEs. If I were a government infrastructure facility, if I ran a hydroelectric dam, I would probably want to check out anything that, say, Volt Typhoon had been exploiting because they've been known to go after government infrastructure targets.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is really interesting. It's kind of it's a new facet of, or a new way to look at the data organized in something that kind of aligns with these emerging threats as they're coming out. So I really like to see this. And then I think you could also do something where you mentioned when we talked about this earlier, you were talking about like a gamification angle, right? Where you could say, all right, how well is this part of the company doing compared to that part of the company on these specific groups of CVEs. So, I mean, that's kind of a positive way of looking at it, but could you see maybe teams using
Yeah, for sure. Like, this allows you to see if you're a retailer, how's my store in Washington doing versus how is my store in New Hampshire doing? And you can do, I don't know, give whoever's less vulnerable a pizza party at the end of the month or whatever. And, we all know that's the ultimate reward in corporate America, of course. Either a pizza party or maybe a new red stapler. I don't know, one of the two.
Yeah, that's definitely what builds the employee experience, improves it, is pizza parties for sure. All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's the only reward I need, right? Like, obviously.
I've known you for years. I don't think I've ever seen you eat pizza.
It happened.
It could happen. All right. Well, this isn't too bad of a month, no 0 days, but there's still a lot of work to do. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next month.
Bye, everyone.